Hey, what's going on, guys? Today I just wanted to do a quick video to give those of you who don't have any experience some very basic tips on how to photograph fireworks. I want to preface this video by saying I don't have a tremendous amount of experience whenever it comes to photographing fireworks. I'm not an expert. Usually for me on the 4th of July, since I have 3 sons, I am running around trying to make sure nobody gets hurt. But last year we actually went to a fireworks show, and my kids are kind of at that age where they don't want to hang out with dad anymore. And so I was kind of left by myself. So I figured, what the heck, I'll go ahead and photograph the show. So this is kind of what worked for me. By all means, experiment. I'm sure you could probably improve on what I'm going to tell you, but this is just kind of basics for those of you who've never done it, to give you kind of a base level on where to start. So the first thing that you're going to need is you're going to need a good sturdy tripod. Don't get one of these lousy, flimsy tripods from Walmart or Target, because you're going to be doing long exposure photography and those things are just going to vibrate. You're going to get camera shake and it's just going to be a problem for you. Get a good sturdy tripod. So I mentioned already that it's going to be long exposure photography. For me, what I found worked was 2 to 5 second long exposures work the best. That way I can get the bursts and the fireworks as they streak down, and I felt that those were the kind of the best time frames to be in, the 2 to 5 second long exposure. I did try to go into a 10-second long exposure, and what I ended up with was a large overexposed circle in the middle of my frame. And part of that is because of the particular show I was at. It's a small town fireworks show. I don't want to say it was inexpensive, but it wasn't one of these huge shows that was very elaborate. A lot of the fireworks went off in kind of the same general area. If you go to a bigger show, they'll shoot fireworks off to the right, off to the left, up high, down low, and you kind of can get a little bit of a spread, and you can do probably a longer exposure than what I was able to get away with. But with the smaller shows where they're all going off in the same place, if you have your shutter open too long, you're going to end up with an overexposed picture. Now, one thing that I did read online that I want to try this year was somebody was saying to do longer exposures, take a piece of black card or black paper, and once you start your exposure, put that, after a firework burst goes off, you put your piece of black paper in front of your lens so that the exposure is still running, and then when the next burst goes off that you want, remove that black piece of paper, let it expose that, and continue to put the paper in front of your lens whenever you're not trying to expose the scene. That way you can expose for multiple different bursts all in one frame. Seems kind of interesting. I don't know how well it'll work in practicality. I plan on trying it out this year, but I won't be able to talk to you guys about that until probably after your fireworks shows have already taken place. So in terms of other camera settings, you're probably going to be fine at ISO 100, and you're probably going to want to be at ISO 100, because since you are doing long exposures, you're going to get noise in the scene, and so if you bump your ISO up, that's only going to magnify it. So ISO 100, and you should be fine, maybe 200, depending on what you've got, depending on where you're at and how much light there is and all of that stuff. In terms of aperture, I used f8 to f11. I've heard other people say 5.6 is also a good setting, and it's not going to be a huge deal. The reason why I went f8 is because the lens I used, I felt that f8 was kind of the sharpest point with the lens. I just used the Canon nifty 50 millimeter cheap plastic lens last year because I happen to have it in my camera bag. So I threw it on the camera and I used it, and it worked well. But as far as your aperture setting, anywhere from 5.6 to f11, you should be fine, because you're not going to be right up on top of these fireworks. You're probably going to be a couple of 100 yards or even more away from the fireworks. So you're going to have a lot of depth of field in your shot anyways. So basically just pick a spot that you're comfortable with, that's exposing the image properly, and wherever you think your lens is sharpest, and you should be okay. So as far as autofocus, or as far as focusing goes, I've read 2 different schools of thought on this. I've read a few people who are really, I don't want to say adamant, but who said that you can autofocus and you'll be fine because the bursts are bright enough that your camera should be able to autofocus on them, and that's probably true. But it can be a bit of a challenge because you're going to be on a tripod. So depending on what focus points you're using and all of that, the fireworks may not go into exactly where you have your focus point set. So it could be a little bit of a challenge. Not saying it wouldn't work, but for me, I had the camera set on a 2-second delay to minimize camera shake on the tripod. So what I did is, instead of trying to focus whenever the burst went off, because it just wasn't going to work for the way I was shooting, I pre-focused it, and then I just set it to manual focus, and I just left it, and I was good to go. And where I was at, and I know a lot of people are probably going to have a similar setup, I wasn't actually able to see where on the ground where they were launching the fireworks from. They were on a fenced-in baseball field, and they were lighting them from there. So all I did was I picked a spot that was roughly the same equivalent distance as where the fireworks were being lit off, focused on it, which was probably a good 300 yards away from where I was taking pictures. Got it in focus, and then I was good to go. Because like I said, you're going to be at f5.6 to f11, 300 yards away. You don't have to be dead on with your autofocus because your depth of field is, or with your focus, because your depth of field is going to be so large at that distance, and then probably the wide angle focal length you're going to use, it's not really going to be much of an issue. So that's what I did, and it worked well for me. Just a couple of other things. You be really careful where you set up for your pictures. I found a spot that I wanted to shoot. I set up there. I waited probably 45 minutes for the show to start, and right as they turned the lights off in the park to get ready to start the fireworks show, I had an entire family of people who walked right in front of my camera and decided they wanted to stand there and watch the show. So, you know, I had to politely ask them to move. They moved, and sure enough, somebody took their place. So be careful where you set up. Really think about whether or not people are going to stand in front of you. Try to find a spot where they can't stand in front of you, because people will. People are just really stupid. And the other issue is because it is oftentimes dark. For example, where I was at the park, they shut the lights off. Kids running around. More than once I had my tripod bumped, and you know, it can just really be very problematic. So really think ahead of time, get there early, set up where you want, where your gear is going to be safe and where you've got a clear view. The other thing is you really are going to want to try to get your best shots in the very beginning, because especially with larger fireworks shows, you're going to get a lot of smoke in the air towards the end of the show, and that's just going to kind of muddy up your pictures. So, you know, try to set up, get your best images first, and then just hope for the best towards the end. One other thing on camera settings, you want to make sure that you probably are going to want to turn off your long exposure noise reduction. For those of you who aren't real familiar with that, what happens is when you do a long exposure picture, let's say you do a 15-second exposure, what's going to happen is after the camera takes that picture, it's going to spend 15 minutes doing all of its cool camera software stuff. So your camera is basically going to be, not going to be able to use your camera for a full 30 seconds. So I turn that off because these fireworks shows don't last very long, and then I just deal with any noise reduction that I need to do after the fact in post-processing. That way I can keep shooting shots and I don't have to worry about it. So as far as white balance goes, I just left mine in auto white balance. It seemed to work just fine for me. And you know, ironically, last year I saw some people who use camera phones and they got some really amazing shots. So even if you don't have a DSLR, I think it's entirely possible to get some good fireworks shots. I was kind of a little irritated because one person got some shots that I actually thought were even better than mine, and she took them with her cell phone. So it is what it is. All in all, just go out there, have fun, make sure you check your pictures as you go along, see how your exposure looks, see how your composition looks, you know, and make the adjustments as needed. Like I said, this isn't an expert's guide to photographing fireworks. This is just kind of a basic, give you an idea of something where to start from, so that you guys can go out there and kind of make your own images, make your own art. So happy 4th of July, everybody. Be safe out there. Have a great weekend. Thanks for watching.